Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So welcome to the Healers Café, and today I have back with me Dr. Matt Lyon. He's a chiropractor and acupuncture practitioner who owned and operated one of the largest chiropractic clinics of its kind in the world. And his clinic has a 6 to 9 month waiting list where clients flew from around the world to participate in a wholly unique mind-body paradigm and practice of healing and wellness. I'm going to leave it at that right now, but I am really thrilled to talk to you about so many subjects, including going back to work in these times. So maybe let's start with that, and then we'll explore the issues that are coming up.
Sure. Well, it's great to be with you, first of all. And it's great to be with your students and all the other great souls who will hear this talk. Yeah, so tell me more about what you'd like to talk about.
Well, I was thinking, well, first of all, where do you live and how has going back to work impacted you and your patients and all that? Because I know that looking at the best that I can from what's happening even in Canada, in different places, we have different rules. Yeah. And different obligations to do different things. So I'm just curious, what is it like for you? What happens and how are people feeling about what's going on?
Sure. So I live in a smaller ranching town north of Boulder, Colorado. Mm-hmm. So I'm about 30 minutes north of Boulder, Colorado. Going back, so I was really blessed. I took 18 months off. I mean, I'm not going to take time off. I love this work so much. I love this medicine so much. I'm always involved in learning and growing. I was excited to shift roles though, and move out of really busy practice, which included a lot of patients and a lot of management and that. And recreate myself. I love the term fascial restructuring or fascial reorganization. So I kind of went through that myself.
Yeah.
And in March, my wife, who's a psychologist, a psychotherapist who does a lot of somatic-based psychotherapy, so we work together. We had a whole center, like we were about to sign the papers on a really beautiful place and upfitted, and then this bizarre experience of COVID-19 descended upon all, this whole world. And so we decided to be like, whoa, let's take a step back. So we actually lived on a big ranch in New Mexico. So in the southwest of the United States, beautiful ranch. My daughter's a great horse rider. And so we just lived sort of the ranch life for a while. And we're like, let's get away from society for a little bit. But, I feel it's so important to be in practice as an emissary of healing, of hope, of kindness, of compassion, and health. We have a lot of conversation these days about sickness and COVID and death rates and mortality rates and contagion rates. And whilst that's an important conversation, there's another conversation that is sorely lacking, which is health, which is the internal state of health and the cultivation of health and the cultivation of wellness and the cultivation of resourcefulness and resilience and ease and really what drives health. What is the immune system and how does that relate to the musculoskeletal fascial system? How does that relate to the energetic system, the biochemical system? So all of that. So to answer your question a little bit more directly, I used to have a really busy practice where it was an interesting concept. I had a big open space. So everyone was treated and worked on in this open space. And I had 6 tables and a large waiting room. And there was kind of this community feel. I knew I didn't want to go back to that. I think that's a lovely practice model, but I wanted to spend, 30 to 90 minutes with clients, in the sort of the depth nature of the work I do, where I integrate myofascial acupuncture, energy, and functional medicine, sort of is the approach I take right now. And then I guess we could call somatic psychology. So I already had in my mind I wanted to change it up. So at least in the state of Colorado, because I see about one person per hour, and I have a really cool old office with these giant windows, I just crack the windows open and people were able to just work that. So I see about one person every hour, new patients I spend about 90 minutes to 2 hours with. So it's going okay. I've just noticed a qualitative shift. I'm so curious what you think, how you feel. I've noticed a qualitative shift in people's nervous systems.
Oh, yes.
We're more on alert, more on guard, more, more in that flexor, reflex, afferent, fight or flight, sympathetic, overdrive, norepinephrine fueled fear state. We're just kind of in this ocean of fear. And that's changed, that's been a big change.
I so agree. And if you look at it between, and we can talk about masks, their validity or not, but give that apart. Let's just say that they are absolutely good. If we're covering ourselves this way, when we're looking at each other, we can't see each other smile. We don't really, we're not used to not reading another person. And when we're walking down the street, and I know because my my mother doesn't wear one because she doesn't, she's elderly and she wants to get oxygen when she's outside, right? And so she's saying, well, it's my choice because I have the right to live or die. I'm not sick and I want to go outside this way and I want to get my vitamin D and I want to get my oxygen. And people are like shunning her like this, going around her. There's so much reflex reaction, like people move out of the way just like that, mask or no mask. But it's unbelievable. And the level of tension in people's bodies is palpable. Like you can actually feel it.
Literally palpable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No,
I love what you say about the faces. And I know you do too, I read so much from facial expression, both in terms of emotional affect, but jaw function, cranial nerve function, head position, eye position. It's so critical for me. And that's one of the first things I pick up on. So you're right. I have to go into such a heart-centered place and to really use that sixth sense of feeling and sensing beyond the five senses and really tuning into where a person's at. But dang, it's hard with the mask sometimes.
Yeah. And I feel one of the big issues in our society is that people are sort of cut down from here, like it's talking heads. We're already disembodied,
Yeah.
And so being disembodied and then asking people to wear masks and then believing or expecting that we're going to become more heart-centered. I mean, that's a big leap. I mean, it's amazing. As a health practitioner, I think that is the only choice we have. But as a society, I find that very difficult. That everything happens and there's good to be seen and good to be drawn out of it. We're asking of ourselves or of people to trust deeply and look at the eyes and really connect, and because people aren't looking at each other anymore. It's not just, it's like by removing the face, it's almost like people are not looking in the eyes either. Yeah. So it's really, it's quite a leap to talk about heart-centeredness.
Yeah.
Under these circumstances.
Yeah, it's so true. I agree. I've noticed that a lot. The redirection of eye contact and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know, and we know the research, well, the research, there is interesting studies looking at the effect of Zoom on people's mood, attention, and brain function. And
Yeah.
you know, so we live in these spaces. I know, but talking with you is so easy because I feel like I can connect to your heart and I have such a context of relationship with you in person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and I think being all on Zoom, I mean, I have seen some meetings that I have on Zoom. In some ways, you can see people and feel closer.
Mm.
But if you don't have a context either, you're much more, yeah, I don't know what, if it's harder in some ways than in person, where you're used to judging all of the body language because you're only seeing a very small part, you know, on Zoom. But given the body language that is outdoors and this hiding and shunning and shaming and all of this really intense fear and anger kind of energy, Zoom feels like a haven, like it's you know, it's the safe place, you know. So
Safe place.
it's a funny kind of turnaround in our society, you know. Yeah. So, like your colleagues that are possibly working as chiropractors, and chiropractors typically will see more than one person in an hour, and have different rooms and are set up this way. Can you speak to the impact it might have on them, or what you've heard? Or
Sure. I've had a lot of exposure to that. You know, it's this. I want to pre-frame this as I want this to be a really empowering message because I've seen a few scenarios play out.
mm-hmm.
Fascinatingly, my friends who work like I do, so really having maybe an integrative model, and I mean no disrespect to any chiropractors who are watching this, but chiropractors who solely focus on pain, or hey, nice to see you, Mrs. Jones, crack, 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 pop, 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 see you later. Those are the guys that are really struggling. And they're struggling for a few reasons. One, people don't want to go in. They don't want to be exposed. Because in their mind, I can live with my back pain or my shoulder pain because they haven't been properly educated that pain is simply a message from your body that relates to your health, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those guys are struggling. And the people who were in high volume models that required a high degree of administration with multiple staff and a concurrent complexity of systems to support that, a lot of those guys are struggling because, in Colorado is one of them, in some states, there's just a clamp down on what you can do. There's just a clamp down on what you can do. Now, having said that, I have noticed there's a cadre of practitioners that I'm connected with that are waitlisted and busy because their emphasis is on health. It's really on wellness. And so people get, oh my gosh, like the health of my fascia, the health of my fascia as it relates to spinal cord pathways, which help brain balance and affect lymphatic flow and activate a number of different neural pathways and non-neural information pathways, all of which are immune signalers. Whoa, I really need this. That I can actually get healthier and better now so that I can co-evolve with this virus as best as I can, which is not to say that COVID-19 as a virus with sensitive people, it can effect huge changes in multiple organ systems that, as we know, can be very deadly. And we can't lose health from that discussion. So the people in my profession, and I've noticed this with acupuncturists too, the people that are really helpful in understanding and provoking and evoking a discussion around health and giving people really powerful treatments and tools so that they feel really empowered about their health. They're like, oh my God, you got to go see Dr. Jim, or you got to go see acupuncturist Susan, or you got to go see this lady, she does Bowen therapy. Oh my God, it's so good. It's like the best thing for me right now. I've also seen it that these guys are very, very full. and have even then translated being able to do Zoom stuff. I personally don't love doing consults via Zoom. I do functional medicine consults via Zoom because I can look at lab work, and I have some friends that do that. It's not my favorite thing because I don't like lab work separate from a person's body and their body language and then the emotional connection. I mentioned that there were 3 situations. So I've seen the situations where people are just really struggling. And then I've seen the situation where people are really thriving. And the more holistic and the more emotionally attuned people are, and the better communicators there are, and they have effective systems that actually work with the whole person, they're doing really well. And then I've seen a bunch of other people, you know, I'll be direct here. I've seen some other folks that do some things that I don't totally agree with. And, you know, gosh, how do I think I've already, we're live recording, so I have to say what I have to say. I've noticed some people that are very afraid of losing patients. And so they're over marketing the value of their systems, which I don't agree with. And I don't agree with that at all. And I don't agree with people that are sort of, it's not that I don't think it's important to have discussions with regulatory agencies if I don't agree with what they're saying. You know, for a while in Colorado, chiropractors weren't essential.
Right.
And I was so grateful that our association was like, whoa, wait, hold up. We're totally essential. You have hospitals that are shut down. You have people that can't even get care. Like, we help. We are a massive second line of defense for you guys. Having said that, I didn't like that some people are like beating the drum for their seminars and promoting live seminars with hundreds of people and just trying to keep people from, you know, bailing out of their practices where people have pre-committed to a year of care and paid $5,000-$6,000 up front. And I don't like when doctors of any variety are fear-based and sort of spinning a story about what they do that isn't in fact validated by the evidence. And that's where I have a little bit of a rub with some of the higher volume chiropractic practices doing some stuff that I just don't think is super cool. But I think that the people who are really have a great message and really have a very true, holistic, reliable, evidence-based way to work with people, they're doing very, very well.
It's interesting. I'm not, well, in Canada, I guess we don't see that middle, that middle group that you're talking about. I haven't really seen that happen here. So, which is, it's interesting. Yeah. And I was going to say, for the holistic practitioners, it's been very interesting because when you mention, you know, the board standing up for chiropractors saying, you know, this is essential. We were, as naturopathic doctors, also considered essential. But here's the kicker. We were not allowed to talk about the immune system. We were not allowed to say
that. A similar thing in the States.
Same, huh? So it's like, well, oh my goodness, you know, here we have, you know, an entire like society that is in fear, and we know the physiological implications of fear on the immune system. We know that it dysregulates. We know what being in chronic stress mode does. Like, you know, it affects your sleep. But well, you know all this, and I think everyone listening probably does too. But it's hugely impactful. And yet, I remember putting out a I guess it's an ad, but it's like, come to my webinar. And I was doing a webinar for the public on boosting your immune system. My trademark is reboot. So I was reboot your immune system. And I got called by my own board to ask me to withdraw that. And I cannot say a single thing about COVID-19. I have to follow what our medical model boards are saying, you know, basically our government boards. And once they say something, then I can say it. And then if they talk about that maybe diet is important after all, then I can say that diet is actually important after all. If they say that the sun is helpful, then I can talk about the sun, vitamin D. So it's like, we can't use our actual training or experience to lead. We must follow a, you know, essentially bureaucratic technocratic order.
Yeah.
First,
And when you step out of that, it's labeled as misinformation.
correct.
That's, at least in the States, it's misinformation.
Yep.
So to talk about immune function, which is part and parcel of our work, whether you're doing bone therapy or some intervention or some chiropractic intervention, there are a number of studies just with chiropractic alone that talk about T-cell upregulation, various components of immune function that are benefited from. There's loads and loads and loads of studies on movement and immune function, nutrition and immune function. I mean, it's all out there. So when it becomes, shh, that's misinformation, I have a real problem with that. I have a real problem with that. And, you know, I also have a deep respect for the epidemiological community and the various allopathic medical communities that are really doing their best on the front lines, as it were, to mitigate death in sensitive people who were the disease progressed.
Well, and you know, and it's not like it's not us and them, because many of them are also having issues. You know, there's I've heard, and that in the States too, there's I think it was 3 hospitals that actually did studies on the impact of vitamin C and one drug. I'm not going to mention it because it's so tabooed. Every time it appears on the media, it disappears, and I think that's a political thing. But those studies they're available. But you have to search them. They're never discussed by the media other than politically.
Yeah, the vitamin C stuff you're referencing, yes, was really defiled by the media as, you know, bunk science, not real, not true. And one of my colleagues, a medical doctor here in the States, was doing high dose vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin C. There's one other thing that was in that little cocktail, and had all the research to support it. And the American Medical Association and his local medical board, you know, really shut it down. He had one of the largest holistic medical clinics in the United States. So it's really deeply troubling that somewhere in the psyche, the collective psyche, well, it's not really that big of a surprise. You know, people are really fearful. They're really scared. And there is this belief that there is this, and it's true, right? There is a virus, and it is structured like COVID-19. COVID-19 means that it started in 19, coronavirus, disease, 19. That's what COVID stands for, as we all know. There will be a COVID-20. There will be a COVID-21. There will be a COVID-22, right? COVID has been around in just different forms.
Yep.
And we as human beings have been co-evolving with viruses and bacteria. In fact, there was a great, much of our immune system comes from our relationships to virus and bacteria. In fact, a portion of our DNA is in fact viruses. So this idea that we're sort of these separate entities and those viruses are out there, I mean, we are living and breathing and coexisting in a whole macro and microbiome, wherein the evolutionary potential of the human is actually turned on by these challenges that come in. Now, look, I get it. You know, like, we have known that public health procedures mitigate death in pandemics. Like, we know this. For sure, I get it. And a healthier society can be much more resilient with said viruses. Here's an interesting statistic. At least this was a couple weeks ago. The United States has a fairly small percent of the world's population. And yet, statistically, we had higher cases and higher deaths than anywhere else in the world. So there's fact. Let me share an opinion. We also, in this particular country, spend more than any other country in the world on health intervention, and yet we have some of the worst public health outcomes. We have some of the worst health. We spend more, but we have like the worst health of industrialized countries, to be fair.
Yeah.
We have a country where 50% of people are obese, 60%, you know, what is it? About 65% of people are overweight. We have about 40 to 50% of people who are obese. We have a diabetes, type 2 diabetes epidemic in our children.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you see the fact that we are super impacted by this disease more than anybody else, I think we also have to look at other health trends and have a conversation about immune function and diet and sunlight and oxygen. Hello, breathing into a mask and recirculating carbon dioxide has been shown to make people tired. It's been shown to show down function. I mean, you're totally dysregulating the whole Krebs cycle and how we produce ATP. So I'll stop there, but yeah, I'm very passionate about it because it has to be a wider conversation. That is misinformation. Stop talking. Misinformation. That's not cool. And when it comes from technocrats, i.e. the major financial drivers of the technological world, Google, Facebook, YouTube, having absolute shutdown. Now, sure, there's crazy people out there saying crazy things, absolutely crazy. But there are smart, intelligent, science-driven, compassionate people with good data and good information to empower people about their health. You lock people in their houses and then scare the bejesus out of them to do anything. When people don't move, their immune system drops.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've raised so many points. I'm trying to keep up with all the pieces I want to say. But to the one point about our evolving biology in the environment, I mean, Zach Bush, I don't know if you've heard about his work, but so far, I don't think all of it is censored anyways, but he is incredible.
He was a physician, right?
Yeah, he's a physician and environmentalist, and he talks about
permaculture. He's really into permaculture.
Exactly, and it's the same idea of the environment in our gut, you know, has the environment in our ecology. So really stretching our way of looking at our relationship to nature, rather than just thinking, oh, we're going to fight nature, we're going to win nature, we're going to bring it down. It's more that we're actually evolving through it. And that's where, when you mention the resilience and looking at what are we putting in our bodies, how are we treating our emotions and our minds, and then looking at the economic infrastructures. Like if there's, I had an interview on Tuesday with a fellow, and he was using the term food deserts.
Yeah.
Which is really a phenomena that is quite prevalent. It would appear in the States where people don't have certain communities, and he was talking specifically about the Black community, but also Latin American community, where they don't necessarily have vegetables or foods that they have access to. They have access only to these fast food outlets and these I forgot what he's called them, like there's stores where you can buy, but it's mostly just
massive processed food. When we lived in rural New Mexico, we were on a gorgeous ranch. Most of the surrounding community lives in deep poverty, and there's a mix of Latino and Hispanic. In New Mexico, I was told that they prefer the term Hispanic because of deep Spanish ancestry, and these are generally poor communities. They are disproportionately affected. And every time we would go to the grocery store, I was like, holy smokes. It was like a big light bulb for me, because I lived in a affluent city, Charlotte, North Carolina. Now I live in Boulder, Colorado. You know, organic farm to table food is super close. The vast majority of people in the United States either don't have access to that or don't have economic access to that. And so when we look at communities that are disproportionately affected, there is a major conversation about how many dollars you have to buy foods that are healthy. And when it's Kraft macaroni and cheese and processed grains and processed meats and sugar and sugar and sugar and huge amounts of obesity, hypertension, high blood pressure, diabetes, pre-diabetes, all these predisposing conditions where you've got loads of cytokines, loads of inflammation, loads of emotional stress in the community because people are in survival, and all of a sudden now, bam. Yeah. And that's not to say that wealthy people aren't affected, but it's different. It's very different.
Definitely. And I was going to say, another thing too, which is if we put this whole virus in relationship to not just the comorbidities of the people most impacted, okay, but if we put it in relationship to other viruses. Now, apparently last year was lighter, but 2 years ago, we're about at the same numbers. We're not at crazy high numbers. And yet, I don't watch television. I don't actually have a television, but I do occasionally, look at the news. And I remember Fauci was making a comment that he looks at health and not the impact that it has on other aspects of people's lives, which means if people no longer have jobs, if they can't pay their rent, if they're losing their homes, the level of depression, the anxiety, the suicide is skyrocketing.
Huge. There's a huge hockey stick. You guys are Canadians. You love your hockey.
Hi, it's Dr. Manon, and I just wanted to take a moment, commercial break, to ask you to subscribe to my podcast and kindly leave a comment if you're enjoying this. And also, just to let you know, I have tips for people in health looking for solutions to just a variety of issues. It's more like an attitude of health, and they're entertaining short videos, and you can find those under drmanonbolliger.com/tip. The link is here, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Hockey stick inflection and anxiety and depression, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, and that's health, right? Like that. So for one virus that turns out to be pretty well no worse than 2 years ago, and I mean they're calling cases now because people are thinking, oh, cases means death. Cases is not deaths, right? Cases is more people being tested. And when you look at the research, because everything is all research, science-based, and you're only allowed to listen to certain people, which to me is a kind of a crazy thing, because part of science to me is the discussions to see whether the premise is good, whether, it's a much bigger context, but the context and the discussions are being removed entirely. And yet, in plain sight, the way I'm looking at this, and let me know your thoughts on this, but I'm looking at this hugely exaggerated curve that was done by the London I forgot the school that did it,
the research study that really had
where it was 94% bigger numbers than actually was the case, right? And I've forgotten the name of the fellow or the school that did that. Sorry, I'm having a brain fart on this one. But the numbers are nothing like that, nothing at all like that. But the strategies implemented are as if nothing has changed. And that's what I find really troubling, is that even the premise of the need for a vaccine, for example, which, I mean, there are vaccines around that are well tested, that have taken a long time and still can cause damage, of course. But in this case, we're speeding this up tremendously to save people with a virus that is changing, because we already know that it's changing, because that's what viruses do. Look at the flu and the flu vaccine. There's 50% efficacy apparently, and also plenty of
Or
side
less,
effects.
or less a few years ago.
Or less. Oh, I know. I'm just trying to be kind. But yeah, you know, and it's like now we're going to be spending all the focused energy and money on saving through a vaccine, which is again fighting against our own relationship with the environment from an outside hero that is not yet proven because they've actually removed the animal studies, maybe because there were so many deaths in the past when they've been working on this virus for like 30 years, right? The corona's been around since forever, and all these ferrets have died, right? I don't know if you know about this, but I was shocked to find out that these ferrets had a beautiful antibody reaction, which is what you want. And at that point, a vaccine is normally approved at that level, right? What happened is when they actually got exposed to the natural virus again, they had a cytokine reaction and all of them died. So like this, now we're speeding up research here. And we've said, yes, looks good so far, but we're not testing the long-term impact. What is going to happen to all these people? And I really worry about, you know, when we call this science, it's like science to a tiny point. It's not truly, so many scientists are actually upset with this because we're going to be the guinea pigs of this, you know, and that worries me a lot.
Yeah, gosh, there's a lot there. Thanks for sharing all that. It's just to double click on one thing you just said. I was speaking with my financial advisor today, and we were just having a conversation about how currency is being devalued because of this crisis. And this is going to come back to what you were talking about, but contextually, this crisis has hit economies all over the world very hard. In fact, globally, this has been more impactful than the Great Depression, which goes back to what you said earlier with relationship to health impacts. What's interesting is our response to that, at least the United States and many European countries, is we say, oh, well, let's just print money. Just print it. You don't need to make it. It's not tied to the gold standard anymore. It's just sort of a made up concept. So you just print more money. Well, when you print more money, the value of that dollar or pound or yen devalues. And we're actually lending money at negative rates, especially in Europe. It's just starting here in the United States. All that to say, we were talking about devaluing currency. And I have a Canadian guy that I love to follow who's very astute talking about silver and gold and these times and so on and so forth. And he said, well, do you want to look at any of the stocks? I mean, you're in health. Do you have a feeling about any of these, companies with the vaccine stuff like Moderna? And I said, I'm not going to put any money in Moderna. This is crazy. I mean, it's so, I don't want to say rigged, but when the US government pays these guys billions of dollars for a vaccine that hasn't really fully been tested, I was like, I don't want any of that on my hands. I said, give me some silver and let's hope for the best.
No,
right? So there's a big context here, but I did want to touch on that.
No, it's a really good point, because again, it's time to look very holistically, because the answers cannot be in one domain, and that's where health and finance and all of that all come together. It's really important.
It's the tensegrity matrix
exactly
of the world's psyche. Yeah. And we are so our bodies don't end with the skin.
Exactly.
Our body is this entire cosmos. One thing I wanted to say, one thing I wanted to say is in the United States, we've had, and I'd have to double check my numbers, but we're at about 160,000 deaths. So to be fair, statistically, that's a pretty high amount of deaths from one thing. And also to be fair, but then I want to come back and give another perspective. My friends who are in medicine, who are physicians or nurses on the so-called front lines, they're like, man, we've seen some bad stuff. This stuff can really mess some people up. So clearly there are people whose sensitivity and inability to adapt to the virus, it's scary and it's really sad. And that's totally legit, 100% legit. My question though is, it's so sad to me that the empowerment on this issue has been, oh, the world will just basically pause until we get a vaccine, with an assumption that a vaccine, once you get it, you're good. And it doesn't work that way. When we saw major diseases that have, been controlled, I really do think, I diverge a little bit. Chiropractors as a whole tend to be hardcore anti-vaxxers, almost to the point where they can't be influential in the arena because they have such strong vitriolic opinions. I see the role, having spent a lot of time in the third world, and my kids and I spent a lot of time in the third world, I have seen how vaccines have helped communities, but I also know that they come at a cost. When we have a big portion of the population that's already pre-flamed, which is to say their gut is already pre-flamed, and now we inject more noxious irritants in there. Yes, are they safe for a lot of people? Sure, I think, based on their health metrics, but there are a large portion of people, they're so pre-flamed, sticking stuff in, and it causes a lot of problems. You have a big group of pro-vaxxers who are autism deniers, and you can't argue with the statistics. When 1 in 100 kids in the United States gets autism, and you look at the number of vaccines, you got to go, And then you look at the American diet, and all of this stuff factors in. So when we talk about the vaccine conversation, one of the biggest heartaches I have in this whole process of COVID-19 is that billions of people are hanging their hats, hanging their hope on a vaccine. Funny story.
Hang on, but it's just hanging on that instead of literally empowering themselves to look after their own internal ecology. I mean, that's what gets me too.
I don't see it as exclusive black or white, no vaccine, only natural. I'm in the conversation. But here's a crazy fact, right? Yesterday, because I really follow precious metals, and when I start to see such a breakdown of currency and society and culture, I'm kind of like, I think, gold looking like a pretty good option, or Bitcoin, right? And so Vladimir Putin, with all due respect, Mr. Putin, you rushing a vaccine through, it was amazing. So the gold price dropped dramatically yesterday, largely because Putin claimed he had a vaccine. So people rushed out of gold to go buy stocks and put their money in all these stocks because, oh my God, we've got a vaccine, the world's going to be okay. That's the level of consciousness that we're at right now. That's hanging its hat not only on one of the more disingenuous and known dishonest dictators in the world to say he's given a vaccine, but I've given it to my daughter, it must be okay. It's nuts. It's totally nuts. And it's so
I didn't hear that one.
With so much smokescreen that's artificially trying to boost confidence without real substance, and then boost economic data without real substance. So you see, we're on a house of cards in many, many ways. So when we come back to the most important thing, as my old Zen teacher said, Matt, the most important thing is the most important thing. The most important thing is people and communities, and that people can feel resilient and feel connected and feel empowered and have joy and have relationships. That's what I'm concerned is eroding through this. And I also want practitioners, whether it's me or other people, to breathe deeply and to find that tenacity and fortitude within to show up for patients who really, really need your touch. You have no idea how one reconfiguration of the fascia can set, well, you have an idea and all your students have an idea, but could set into motion incredible activity in that body that could save their life. And I don't care if people tell me that's misinformation. It's not. You alter the structure of the human body. You upregulate the genes that are associated with secretory IgA and other immune modulators. You decrease inflammation. You give people hope, and they're breathing deeper. Now their lungs are better. So maybe they get the COVID virus, but now it doesn't progress. That's the bigness of what we do. And I don't want people to get scared by all of these thought police out there that aren't actually thinking in truth at all. So, you know, if I get shut down, although I don't know how that would be possible given the work that I do and that I follow the regulations out of respect for the system, but patients need to know that health is mind, body, emotion, spirit, soul. It is mind, body, spirit, emotion, soul. It doesn't exclude vaccines. It doesn't exclude allopathic medicine. It includes the best of it, but it transcends scientism. And scientism is a religious, fanatical thought system that is, in fact, not based in rational thought.
Oh, well, I think you've summed it up. I'm just going to go ditto, but I'll do your expression double press or whatever, double click on one point, because I did want to raise, because it's easy to be labeled an anti-vaxxer if you say anything about vaccines. And I wanted to raise this issue because I think a lot of people don't realize this. And and again, I'm not voting one way or another. That's not my main thing. And everyone needs to make, in my mind, a very conscious decision and get information. But when I was doing my master's in law, I was looking into this pretty seriously. And I saw that hygiene had a huge impact. And we don't talk about hygiene. I mean, you did, and Zach talks about hygiene. There's people talking about hygiene. But I think that's something we need to look at, because now that our economy is falling apart and there's more and more poverty, we're going to have, again, hygiene issues, major hygiene issues, which are going to cause all kinds of problems. The other thing I wanted to raise that people may not know is that in 1986, the pharmaceutical companies no longer needed to do payouts for damages. And they had paid out enormous amounts. So, and it's very hard to prove that a vaccine caused the damage. So you can be sure that the billions that were paid out it was hard work to be able to set that. But now there is no liability, which means that we're rushing things and there's no one responsible. But what really got me, I just got to share this, because it was in marketing class that I got this. And I was like, what? We were looking at effective campaigns. And in a study from Yale University, this is like super recent, you can go to their site. And it's basically, they're trying to figure out an effective vaccine campaign, and they have 12 main ways that they're going to be testing in small groups, like you do any market research, on how to get people to choose vaccines, because now there's all this production and they need to make sure that the market is ready. So it's like literally a propaganda campaign that is being studied at Yale University, and you can go to their site. It's in plain sight. But I think where I have issues is where, why does it take propaganda to convince people? Why don't we have completely open discussions? And I think it's super important, because Forbes had an article that I also came across. It says, "Don't do your own research," by Ethan Siegel. He says, doing your own research is destructive and dangerous. And this is in Forbes. And it's like, wait a minute here. Is the message like, just be docile and follow? Like, to be able to, it is, I know, but to be healthy, you need to be able to express, you need to have opinions, and you can be wrong. It's fine to be wrong, but let's debate it. Let's talk about it.
And that's the hallmark of, when I say liberal, I don't mean left, free democratic society. Those are the foundational principles.
Absolutely.
And what's fascinating to me is that so much of the style of control and thought policing is mimicking the Chinese system,
Yeah.
a hardcore dictatorial system that is based in Mao's postmodern nihilism. And so the challenge is that this thought policing it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous because it actually takes out dialogue and discourse, all of which can drive the scientific process and the evolutionary process of medicine. And by medicine, I mean every facet of it, from Bowen therapy to the work I do to, you know, neurosurgery, the whole kit and caboodle. It's so scary to me. And the loss, the usurping of liberty based on fear, that when you really follow the money has clear benefactors, and we can't even talk about that. That's frustrating to me. And also that excludes such a giant base of helpful information, all in the spirit that feels very like, you know, very, very
Big brotherish.
Mao. I don't like that. And what I find interesting in the United States, and let me tell you that I was raised in a home that was very liberal and very democratic. You know, my mother supported the Southern Poverty Law Center. Both of my parents grew up in the South during segregation, the South of the United States during segregation. And we grew up with amazing values of inclusivity and equality. I have watched the liberal left in the United States become just as insane as the far conservative right. And like creating, you know, Biden in one of his on stage, he said, "We choose." Now I know Biden's got some cognitive decline challenges, so I think there's some medical issues there, but he said, we choose facts over truth. And I thought, you know, isn't that it? You know, we make up these facts, but we're not really living in truth. And, you know, I mentioned economy and I mentioned politics and we mentioned socioeconomics, but health is the optimal state of well-being of mind, body, emotion, and spirit. And it is also a sociological phenomenon. We are biopsychosocial beings that are co-relating and co-evolving amongst this whole matrix, this tensegrity matrix of the thought field.
You know, it's so funny because that's the definition that the World Health Organization has of health.
Yeah.
You look up the original, you know, definition, that's what they say. It's not what's happening now because of the financing and all that, but it is actually what they once said, you know, which is interesting, right?
So, you know, I think the opportunity, in this is that all that aside, I want to choose my words carefully here. Those of us in the health field can be quiet but powerful voices in the community that can work on that one-to-one or, you know, one-to-many level for people who are influencers and really help shift people's minds, while simultaneously people are valuing health by and large, I think, way more than ever, because we truly see that our health is literally our wealth. You know, we always used to say that, and, you know, my intro lectures, well, your health is your wealth, and if you don't have your wealth, and people are like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. Now people are like, oh my God, I totally get it. Like, you know, we have mass unemployment, mass economic impact. And so the opportunity is to be these torchbearers. Yeah. You know, and it doesn't take a bunch of torches to light up the darkness. You know, it takes a few courageous souls who will carry the torches and other courageous souls who will take the torch and just pass it on. In this case, it's the light of knowledge. It's the empowering knowledge that health comes from the inside out.
Oh, so well said.
Inside out. B.J. Palmer said, above, down, inside out, meaning, you know, we're spiritual, energetic beings who then produce health from the inside out. Doesn't exclude allopathic intervention, but it says the core basis, the philosophy of health is that we are, and this comes straight out of Gray's Anatomy, that the central nervous system is the master controller of the entire body. We know fascia is a part of the central nervous system. Therefore, any blocks or breaks in that central nervous system through stressors, physical, mental, emotional, nutritional, biochemical, will block the ability to self-regulate and to self-heal. Mm-hmm. So it just is simple Aristotle logic that it makes sense to work with the body to build it up from within so that it can self-regulate, self-heal, and co-evolve in the best way. Mm-hmm. We're all better for that. We're all better for that. And I think that's the opportunity now, is to really get super passionate, become masterful at our craft. And if people have more downtime now, it's such an amazing time to learn and to study and to build your skills, to take your teachings online. And so I just think it's a great time. And I know that, you know, one of the Buddha's great teachings was impermanence. So in actual fact, this is going to pass. You know, as my grandmother always used to say, this too shall pass. So it's going to pass. It's going to transform. And then this is going to be an even better marketplace for your students and for me and for you to enter into. So I think, you know, it's scary times and it's frustrating times, but I think this is also such an evolutionary tension. And so tension, that sort of friction and tension in a chaos physics is usually what would then burst forth a higher order of organization, which previously was not available. That's the quantum jump. That's a quantum leap. That's a quantum evolutionary jump. That's, hey, we're fish and we're swimming in this ocean, and all of a sudden a few of us are like, wait a minute, this water is polluted. I think we need to fly like the birds I've seen. You know, and the first few go on shore and they sort of flop and they don't make it. But after a while, something kicks in, and we saw that birds actually became fish from an evolutionary context. And I think that's where we're at now. So I think this is the evolutionary possibility of really birthing wings and really creating a whole new humanity. But I think we're at the brink of massive breakdown if enough people don't stand up for sanity.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with everything you've said. And I do feel positive about this, because I do feel it is an opportunity for good to emerge. And I love that you're encouraging the healers, the practitioners to do their work, because this is a time where the healers are the front line of this evolution. It really, so many people need deep healing. Yeah. And this is the time that we can really serve at the highest level possible. So I just wanted to just say that, and also not to be afraid of numbers. Use your voice. It's one little voice, but if everyone has one little voice, you know, there's a symphony. So, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. We'll have to do this again in like 5 months and see where the world's at.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.